we are looking at the question and answers of the rise of nationalism in Europe. Now the first one, write a short note on Giuseppe Mazzini. Now, if you have to write a short note on Giuseppe Mazzini, first, he was born in Genoa in 1805 in a middle class family. Okay? At the age of 24, he was sent into exile in 1931 for attempting a revolution in Liguria. So, let us put that down, born in Genoa in the year 1805. Okay, middle class family. Next point, sent into exile at the age of 24. Okay, next. He was an Italian revolutionary and an important figure in liberal nationalism, and he was committed to oppose monarchical forms and fight for liberty and freedom. So, we can write he was an Italian revolutionary, fought for freedom and liberty. What else do we know about him? He became a member of the secret society, that is Carbonari, and to involve the youth, he founded the underground secret societies Young Italy and Young Europe. Okay, so he was part of Carbonari, secret society, Carbonari, and he also started two more secret societies, and that is Young Italy and Young Europe. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. So, we can see here he was against monarchy. Okay, so these are the main points in case you have to write a short note on Giuseppe Mazzini. The next question that we have is to write a short note on Count Camillo the Cavour. So, if you have to write a short note on him, he was a political leader and an Italian statesman and was born in Turin in August 1810. Okay, so here we have born in 1810 in Turin, and you can also write that he was an Italian statesman and political leader. Unlike Giuseppe Mazzini or Giuseppe Garibaldi, he was neither a revolutionary nor a diplomat, but he was an astute diplomat. Diplomat means who has a way of keeping very good relationships. So, he was a diplomat. That means he was not a revolutionary, nor was he fighting for freedom or trying to get democracy or anything. Though he was tactful, he had a good alliance with France. He neutralized France, whereby Sardinia-Piedmont succeeded in defeating Austrian forces and uniting the northern states of Lombardy, Parma, Modena and Tuscany. Later, even the central states except Rome were annexed by Cavour with the help of armed volunteers under Giuseppe Garibaldi. So, we can say that he managed to unite the northern and central states. Okay? And in case you want to add over here, he was a diplomat, not a revolutionary, nor a democrat. Okay, and this he brought it together with armed forces and also with the help of Garibaldi. Our next question is about the Greek War of Independence. Now, what are the main points in this? Let us see. Greece had been a part of the Ottoman Empire since 15th century. So, it had been part of Ottoman Empire since 15th century. Okay? The growth of revolutionary nationalism and liberalism in 19th century sparked off a struggle for independence among the Greeks in 1821. So, 1821, you find that struggle for freedom started in Greece. The next point we can see, poets and artists lauded Greece as the cradle of European civilization and mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against the Muslim empire. So that means they lauded, that means they praised that they had lot of civilization, they had lot of culture, and they wanted freedom from the Muslim rulers, that is the Ottoman Turks. So here, Greece lauded for its ancient civilization and you can see struggle for freedom. Here itself you can write against Muslim rulers. Okay, that is the Ottoman Turks. Nationalists in Greece got support of Greek living in exile and Europeans who had sympathy for ancient Greek culture. So you can see here, you can talk about ancient Greek civilization or even culture. So everyone supported them. The English poet Lord Byron organized funds and later went on to fight in the war where he died of fever. And the Treaty of Constantinople, which is now known as Istanbul, in 1832 recognized Greece as an independent state. So, in 1832, Greece became an independent state by the Treaty of Constantinople. So, you need not add that Lord Byron also supported them. Basically, all poets and writers and everyone supported them. It needs to be noted that culture played an important role in creating the idea of the nation. Nation means that feeling, that because Greece is made up of little islands. So, for them to feel that we all are one nation, art, poetry, stories and music helped express and shape the Greek nationalistic feeling. So all of them felt that we should have a nation of our own, we don't want to be under the Ottoman Turks, and that's why they fought for their freedom, and they finally were given their freedom in 1832. Okay. The next question is to write a short note on the Frankfurt Parliament. It is the name of the German National Assembly founded during the Revolution of 1848. It tried to unite Germany in a democratic way. So in 1848, this was formed, that is the Frankfurt Parliament, and that is the name given to the German National Assembly. Okay, so the Frankfurt Parliament is the new name of the German National Assembly in 1848. It constituted 831 elected members. So how many members did it have? 831 elected members in this assembly, or what we call the Frankfurt Parliament. It largely represented liberal middle class interests, and it was convened in the Church of St. Paul's in Frankfurt, that is in 1848. That is, we already saw the date, it was on 18th May. So if you want to specify 18th May, even then it's okay. 18th May 1848. The King of Prussia, Frederick Wilhelm IV, rejected the Frankfurt Parliament deputies' offer of the crown. That means they offered him the crown, but he rejected it. So let us write his name down. Frederick Wilhelm, that is the King of Prussia, for rejected the crown offered to him. That was in this parliament. Though the Frankfurt Parliament failed to achieve its purpose, but the important consequence or the result or the effect, henceforth, Prussia took on the leadership of the movement for the unification of Germany. So the main effect of this was Prussia took up the leadership for the unification of Germany. So these are the main points that you will write. That means when it was formed, how many elected members. Though the King of Prussia refused to accept the crown, basically it took up the leadership of unification of Germany. Our next short note is about the role of women in nationalist struggles. Role of women in nationalist struggles. A large number of women participated actively in nationalist struggles over the years. That means in France, Germany, Italy. औरतों का भी एक हिस्सा रहा उसमें जब वो राष्ट्रीयता के लिए struggle कर रहे थे. They formed their own political associations, newspapers, journals, and took part in demonstrations and political meetings. So we can see here in France, Germany, Italy, we had women taking part Now, how did they take part? They had different journals in which they wrote or they published, and they also had taken part in the demonstrations or political meetings. Journals, political meetings, or demonstrations. Okay, in all these ways they took part. Next, universal adult male suffrage was adopted by women, were denied suffrage rights during the elections of all German National Assembly, which means women did not take part in the elections because they were not given suffrage. Now, what is the meaning of suffrage? Suffrage or right to vote, okay, was not given to women, was not given to women, unfortunately. That means, though we are talking about their role, they did take part in political meetings, demonstrations, writing in newspapers and all, but they couldn't vote for whoever they wanted. Women had liberty to participate, but not equality. So, liberty was there, yes, but equality, no. असमानता थी, यानी औरतों को वोट करने को अलाउड नहीं था. फ्रीडम था, लिबर्टी, आपको पॉलिटिकल मीटिंग में भाग लेना है या ऐसे आप ज्वाइन कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आप वोट नहीं कर सकेंगे. So this was the role played by women in the different freedom struggles or the nationalistic movements. So we have seen all the short notes. Now, question number 2. What steps did the French revolutionaries take to create a sense of collective identity among the French people? The steps taken by French revolutionaries to create a sense of collective identity was, first, the idea of la patrie or le citoyen. Okay? So, the first point is la patrie or the idea of le citoyen. In French, patrie means fatherland and citoyen means citizen. So they created a feeling that we are the citizens of one nation and this is going to be our fatherland. The second point in that, they started creating that sense of feeling that we belong to this country or this nation by having a French flag, that is the tricolored flag chosen to replace the former royal standard. The Estate General was renamed as the National Assembly. Now, the Estate General had the first estate, second estate and the third estate. Now it was known as National Assembly, where people feel that we are also part of it. Okay, so they had the tricolor flag and the National Assembly. They also started new hymns which were composed, oaths which were taken and commemorated, and a centralized administrative system with uniform law was started for all the citizens. So, new hymns composed, uniform administrative system all over the country, and internal custom duties were also abolished and uniform weights and measures were started. So, no internal custom duties. That means they didn't charge when things had to move from one place to another within the country, and also uniform system of weights and measures. Because earlier in each part of the country the weights and measures system was different. Regional dialects were discouraged and French was encouraged as spoken in France, so that there is a common language. Everyone will feel that we have a common language. So, French adopted as a common language. वो राष्ट्रीयता की भावना पैदा करने के लिए ये पॉइंट्स आपको लिखने हैं. दैट मीन्स जैसे हम मातृभूमि बोलते हैं वो पितृभूमि बोलते हैं. सिटीजन यानी नागरिक, तो नागरिक होने की कल्पना या उनका तिरंगा झंडा यानी फ्रेंच का झंडा जो है वो है ब्लू, वाइट एंड रेड. नेशनल असेंबली जहाँ पे सभी इलेक्टेड मेंबर्स होंगे. न्यू हिम्स यानी एक्चुअली एंथम या नेशनल एंथम, राष्ट्रगान, तो उन्होंने जो चालू किया उसको मार्सेयस कहते हैं. यूनिफॉर्म यानी एक सरखा, गणवेश नहीं, यूनिफॉर्म यानी एक सरखा एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सिस्टम पूरे देश में. सिमिलरली यूनिफॉर्म वेट्स एंड मेजर्स यानी वज़न करने का तरीका, या अंदर ही अंदर जो इंटरनल कस्टम ड्यूटीज़ लगती थी वो उन्होंने बंद कर दी. और फ्रेंच एक कॉमन लैंग्वेज यानी पूरे राष्ट्र में सभी एक दूसरे के साथ बात कर सके, नहीं तो हर जगह में अलग अलग बोली भाषा रहती थी या डायलेक्ट रहता था. सो दिस इज़ द वे दैट वी कैन सी दैट the steps taken by the French revolutionaries to bring the people together, to unify them together and to create a sense of collective identity among the French people. So you can write these points. We now look at question number 3 in your textbook. Who were Marion and Germania? What was the importance of the way in which they were portrayed? Marion, now these are two different, let us look at them. Marion and we want about Germania. Okay, both of them are different. First, let us look at Marion. From 1789, females appeared in paintings as symbols of liberty and revolution. Marion and Germania were female allegories invented by artists in the 19th century in France and Germany respectively to represent the abstract idea of nation in concrete form. So this was a way to personify a nation. So female figure in France was Marion, and the underlying idea behind portraying Marion with the symbols of liberty and republic, that is red cap, cockade, tricolor and popular name, was to represent the French nation as French people's nation. Statues of Marion were erected in public places to remind the public of national symbol of unity and to persuade them to identify with it. Her images were also marked on coins and stamps. So, you will find that Marion was in France, symbol of unity, nation and liberty. Then we had Marion, the picture of Marion on stamps and coins. Then we also saw that she was represented in what way? Red cap, cockade and the tricolor. So all these were in France to create a feeling of nationalism. And this is an allegory created by artists, and this was from 1789. Okay. Now let us look at Germania. This was also a female figure. Germania was an allegory of the German nation. Germania of Germany was depicted by artist Philip White in 1848. So this was in 1789, while this was in 1848. And this was in France, while this was in Germany. She was represented standing against a background where beams of sunlight shine through the national tricolor flag, wearing a crown of oak leaves and holding an unsheathed sword in her hand. So, she was wearing crown of oak leaves with and a sword. Unsheathed, that means without the cover. The underlying idea was to symbolize Germans as heroic. So, this was a symbol of heroism. राष्ट्रीयता की भावना पैदा करने के लिए उन्होंने फ्रांस में और जर्मनी में एक ऐसे चिन्ह बनाना चाहा, तो एक औरत का रूप लेके जर्मेनिया और मैरियन का रूप जो है, ताकि आपको जैसे हम बोलते हैं भारत माता, so then we think of the nation as a woman. So this one was symbol of heroism, that's why they're shown with a sword, and this was for liberty and unity. So these were the two symbols, you can say, which were created by the artists. Question number 4 asks us to briefly trace the process of German unification. Now, German unification, here we also saw that Prussia took the lead. So, German Empire headed by Kaiser William I of Prussia was proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles in 1871. German unification was a long and complicated process. In the beginning of the 19th century, Germany was not a unified state, but a collection of 39 autocratic states. So, what did Germany consist of? Germany had 39 states, and these had to be unified. Unification was a slow process. That means bringing all these 39 autocratic states together. The leadership was provided by, we can see, the Prussian Kaiser William I. of Prussia. Otto von Bismarck was the chief minister of Prussia, and he was the chief architect of the German nation. So, this was the king and his prime minister, Otto von Bismarck. Steps were already underway as early as the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. That means they had already started idea of unification. German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched by the Treaty of Versailles in 1815. Economic unification preceded political unification, which means first there was economic unification, then political unification. Economic unification was first, and then in 1834 a customs union or the Zollverein allowed unhindered movement of goods, capital and people. That we saw even in France. That means custom duties which had to be paid again and again internally, all that was stopped. Free goods could pass, people could pass, and it was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. Growth of railroads and heavy industries by private capital in Prussia provided the German states adequate support. Though it failed, in 1848, that early, the Frankfurt Parliament under the liberal initiative made concerted attempts to create different regions of German Confederation into a nation state. These were to be governed by an elected parliament under the leadership of King Wilhelm IV of Prussia. We already saw earlier he had not accepted the crown. Bismarck followed a policy of blood and iron for German unification. Just like Subhash Chandra Bose had said, Bismarck also said, "Give me blood and I shall give you a nation." 3 wars were fought over 7 years. So, Bismarck's we had blood and iron policy. And in this policy, we can see that there were 3 wars fought over 7 years. 3 wars, that is in 7 years. That is Danish-Prussian War, Austro-Prussian War, and France. So that means the 3 wars were with Denmark, Austria, and France. Denmark, Austria, and France. Okay, with these 3 countries over 7 years there were wars. And finally, it led to political unification. Political unification of Germany was engineered on the main foundation of economic unification, homogeneity of language. Homogeneity means same language, and strong nationalist cultural movement. So, politically it was unified, economically it was unified, and also we had a common German language. So, you can see just like how France was unified, even Germany was unified. तो German unification के लिए पहले economic unification हुआ, यानी उनको एकत्रित लाया गया. पहले वो 39 states थे, उसके बाद में political unification हुआ. Main इसमें किसका हिस्सा था? Otto von Bismarck. He was the prime minister. The king was Kaiser William I. 3 wars हुए उनके, युद्ध हुए, 7 साल चले, डेनमार्क के साथ, ऑस्ट्रिया के साथ और फ्रांस के साथ. राष्ट्र बनने के बाद में एक कॉमन लैंग्वेज उनको जोड़ रही थी और वो है जर्मन लैंग्वेज. Looking at question number 5, what changes did Napoleon introduce to make the administrative more efficient in the territories ruled by him? While we did the lesson, also we saw the changes that he brought about. Though he was a dictator, he was also a good dictator. So, he was against democracy, but the administrative system which was introduced by him made the system more rational and efficient. The Napoleonic Code of 1804 was a major step in establishing rule of law. So, 1804, you had the Napoleonic Code, or what we call rule of law. That means the law will be made and it will be, all the rule will be according to that. Napoleon formed the French legal system and simplified the administrative divisions. So that was the first thing he did. The first point we can see, administrative system. Was simplified. Then he also made a proper legal system. All privileges based on birth were taken away. So, equality before law was established and right to property was also secured. In countries like Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, feudal system was abolished and peasants were freed from serfdom and manorial dues. So, basically he created equality and he also stopped the system of serfdom. That means he removed the feudal system. So, the second right which people had, one was right of equality, everyone was equal in the eyes of law, and they also had the right to property. Based on birth, nobody would have extra privileges. In towns, guild restrictions were removed, transport and communication system were improved, and these new reforms were appreciated by the peasants, workers, farmers, everyone liked it. So, earlier guilds were not allowed. That means traders used to have their guilds. They used to come together so for their common benefit. But now guilds were allowed. So guilds were also allowed. And transport and communication improved. Uniform laws were established for all, whether it was a businessman or a small sector producer. Uniform systems of weights and measures were also there, national currency, and this made it easy for goods to go from one place to another or even for people. So, uniform weights and measures and easy movement of goods. So, all this we can see. What were the things that Napoleon introduced? Napoleon Bonaparte जब राज करने लगे तो उन्होंने क्या क्या चेंजेस लाए? We can see administrative system simple बनाया गया, legal system एक तरीके से लिखा गया ताकि लॉ के हिसाब से रूल होगा, इक्वालिटी यानी समानता, राइट टू प्रॉपर्टी, आप प्रॉपर्टी हासिल कर सकते थे, गिल्ड्स या श्रेणी जो बोलते हैं, ट्रांसपोर्ट एंड कम्युनिकेशन वो भी अच्छा हुआ और एक ही वेट्स और मेजर का सिस्टम पूरे देश में चला, उसके कारण जो बाइंग सेलिंग या व्यापार था उसमें भी सुविधा हुई. The next questions which they have given you is basically for discussing. Explain what is meant by the 1848 revolution of the liberals. What were the political, social and economic ideas supported by the liberals? The 1848 revolution of the liberals refers to the tide of discontent in many European countries led by the educated middle class. Events in France brought about the abdication of the monarch Louis Philippe, and France was proclaimed a republic based on universal male suffrage. That means women were not allowed to vote. Changes in France inspired men and women of the liberal middle class of Germany, Italy, Poland, Austria, Hungary to fight for national unification. In Europe, it marked the end of the rule of Metternich and secured the overthrow of his system, which prevailed since 1815, and more autonomy was granted by the Habsburg rulers to the Hungarians. Now, they supported political, social and economic ideas. In the political field, let us see, primary aim of the liberals was to establish freedom for the individual and equality before all in the eyes of law. It emphasized the concept of representative government based on the consent of the people. Liberalism was against autocracy and for the end of society based on privileges, and they favored supremacy of the people, freedom of press and association. In the social field, they emphasized equality before law and individual freedom and inviolability of private property. The issue of extending political rights to women was led by liberal movements in which women participated. In the economic field, you find that they urged the end of state interference in economic life of society, so they fought for freedom of markets, abolition of state-imposed restrictions on movements of goods and capital and people. So basically, you can see that the 1848 revolution of the liberals was on three fronts. That means economic, social and political. Now, in each of this, what did they want? In political, they did not want autocracy. Okay, so they did not want autocracy and they wanted representative government. That means which they have elected. That's what they wanted. Socially, they wanted equal rights to women also. And economically, they did not want interference, which was unwanted. Okay, so these were the main things that they fought for. If you look at the second question, how did culture play an important role in creating idea of the nation in Europe? Or give 3 examples to show the contribution of culture to the growth of nationalism. Now, if you see the different things in culture in Europe, you can see there was art, poetry, stories, music, language, arts like sculpture, painting, artists. So basically, the European culture we are talking about here art, literature, language, artists, etc. Okay, so that was what European culture was all about. Question number 3, through a focus on any 2 countries, explain how nations developed over the 19th century. This question has already been discussed, or how the history of nationalism in Britain was unlike the rest of Europe. So when we take 2 countries, how it is different in 2 different countries. We have seen Germany, we have seen Italy, and we saw how it was different in France. So that question we have already discussed. Question 4, about nationalism in Britain now, how it was different. No revolution was there. Before 18th century, there was no British nation. People had different identities, that is ethnic groups, that is English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, lived in the British Isles. Each of these had their own cultural and political tradition. Unlike the rest of Europe, nationalism in Britain was not a result of sudden upheaval or revolution. It was a result of long-drawn process forged through the propagation of dominant English culture. Symbols like the English language, British flag and national anthem were actively promoted. So what was the first thing that we see which was different in British nationalism? Okay. In British nationalism, you will find there was no revolution, unlike how we had in French Revolution. Second, the British had different ethnic groups. The ethnic groups consisted of the English, the Scots, the Welsh and the Irish. Okay, all together they form the British Isles, or what constituted Great Britain. Now, they needed something to bring them together. So, what was the common symbol? Their language, flag and national anthem. Flag, their language, that is the English language, and the national anthem. Next, we see the role of Parliament. In 1688, through a bloodless revolution, the English Parliament seized power from monarchy. So, first of all, we can see there was no revolution and there was no bloody period. That means there was no violence. The Parliament became the chief instrument to set up a nation state with England as its centre. By the Act of Union between England and Scotland, United Kingdom of Great Britain was formed. So, you can see there was no revolution, or we call it a bloodless revolution. That means there was no violence. and we had a parliamentary system. Which was set up in Great Britain. Scotland and Ireland survived only as subordinate partners of the British nation. Thus, it was through parliamentary action and not by means of revolution or war that United Kingdom was forged into strong nationalist state. अभी ग्रेट ब्रिटेन का हिस्ट्री थोड़ा अलग कैसे रहा? फ्रांस में हमने देखा क्रांति हुई, यहाँ पे क्रांति नहीं हुई, प्लस इट वाज ब्लडलेस यानी वायलेंस नहीं था, हिंसा नहीं हुई. पार्लियामेंट्री सिस्टम से उन्होंने सभी जो एथनिक ग्रुप्स थे, इंग्लिश, स्कॉट यानी ये स्कॉटिश बोलते थे, वेल्श बोलते थे, आयरिश बोलते थे, एक कॉमन भाषा यानी इंग्लिश, एक कॉमन ध्वज यानी फ्लैग और एक राष्ट्रगान यानी नेशनल एंथम, ये करके उन्होंने उनको एकत्रित किया. तो ये थोड़ा अलग रहा एज कंपेयर टू फ्रांस. The fifth and the last question that we discuss here, why did nationalist tension emerge in the Balkans? Now you know that Balkans was a region of geographical and ethnic nations comprising today what we call Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, Montenegro, whose inhabitants were broadly known as Slavs. So the Balkan states in general had different types of people, but their ethnicity was similar. That means they belonged to one race known as the Slavs. Since a long time, a part of Balkans was under the control of Ottoman Turks. Despite attempts at modernization and internal reforms, 19th century saw the weakening of the Ottoman Empire. Dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire fueled the aspirations of subject nationalities for independence. Many broke away from its control and declared independence. Balkan states were fiercely jealous of each other and hoped to expand at each other's expense. As they struggled to define their identities and independence, European powers manipulated the nationalist aspiration of the subjects to fulfill their own imperialistic designs. However, this was a period of intense rivalry among European powers over trade and colonies. The dismembering of Ottoman Empire with its Balkan states became a scene of big power rivalry. Each power was keen on countering the hold of the other power and extending its own control. Thus, nationalist tensions emerged in the Balkan because of national aspirations of Balkan states on one hand, and on the other hand, the imperialist designs of European powers, that is Russia, Germany, England, and Austro-Hungary. So now let us put down the points. Why did national tension arise in the Balkans? Okay. So first point was Ottoman Empire weakened. European nations became more ambitious and imperialistic. Balkan states wished independence. European powers eyed the Balkan states and coveted them. अभी बाल्कन रीजन जो है वो एक छोटा रीजन, बहुत छोटा नहीं है, लेकिन छोटा होने के बावजूद उसमें जो लोग रहते हैं वो आज जो हम कहते हैं रोमेनिया, बल्गेरिया, अल्बानिया, ग्रीस, मैसेडोनिया, क्रोएशिया, बोस्निया, हर्ज़ेगोविना, स्लोवेनिया, सर्बिया और मॉन्टेनिग्रो, ये सब लोग जो थे बाल्कन के, एक पूर्वज उनके रहे, या उनको बोलते हैं स्लाव रेस. ओके, सो द बाल्कन स्टेट्स, दे आर बेसिकली स्लाव्स. पहले ऑटोमन टर्क्स जब ऑटोमन एम्पायर पर राज कर रहे थे, तब उनका राज था बाल्कन स्टेट्स पे. ऑटोमन एम्पायर कमज़ोर होने लगा और बाल्कन स्टेट्स को लगा कि हमें राष्ट्रीयता मिलनी चाहिए, हमें एक सेपरेट राष्ट्र बनाना चाहिए. सो उनको वो चाहते थे कि वो इंडिपेंडेंट हो जाए, स्वतंत्र हो जाए. लेकिन यूरोपियन नेशंस जो चाहते थे कि उनका साम्राज्य बढ़ाए, जैसे कि रशिया, इंग्लैंड, फ्रांस एंड अदर कंट्रीज़ लाइक ऑस्ट्रो-हंगेरियन, इंग्लैंड, तो वो उनकी नज़र थी बाल्कन स्टेट्स पे. Balkan states are of very strategic importance, and that is why Balkan became an important part where a lot of nationalistic tensions arose in this particular period.